Do you feel like you lost just your focus just a wee bit on your finances over the summer? Well, guess what? If you did, you are not alone. And stay tuned to this week's episode of the 5-part end of summer financial checklist right here on the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. And welcome to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm David Scranton. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Sarah Samuels. And today, we're exploring with you our 5-part end of summer checklist. So if you feel like you lost your focus on your finances just a little bit, maybe you're vacationing, spending time with family members, well, guess what? Now it's time to start getting back on track. So, Sarah, do you think that, you lost focus at all over the summertime here? Tell me.
Oh, I don't know, Dave. I always try to keep my focus, but it's very easy to slack off. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners would feel the same, which thank you, of course, for joining us here this beautiful weekend on the Retirement Income Source, where it is all about the income. But you're in luck if you feel like you've slacked off maybe a little bit, taken too many vacations this summer. Well, we have a 5-part series of what you need to look out for, what you need to review as we're heading into the end of summer.
And you slacked off just 3 weeks ago when you went for lobster mini season, and you only got 15 lobsters. We talked about that a few weeks ago. And that's slacking off by Sarah Samuel's standards of getting lobster. But
hey, there's some things you can't control. Water quality, but there were a lot of boats in there, and it was a good time. It's always sad when the summer comes to a close. It's the Boys of Summer song. It's kind of like this nostalgic feeling, but it doesn't have to be depressing or sad. You can make some changes now to get back on track, especially with your checklist as you're going over all your finances. So, Dave, let's get right into it. Let's get through our 5. What's number 1 here?
Okay, so step 1 is really taking an honest inventory of what you have. And, you may say, well, that's easy. Gosh, I've done that. But, it's not really that easy. Sometimes, think about it. Do you really have a handle on how much money is in all of the various accounts? Do you have a handle on what kind of investments are in those accounts? A lot of times I meet with people in my office, and they think that they've given me everything. And then suddenly I get a phone call and saying, oh, I forgot, I've got this other account over here. So it starts with an honest assessment of what you have in terms of investments, where you are in terms of debt, interest rates, number of payments left, remaining unpaid balances of various debts. Also, insurance policies. When's the last time you reviewed your insurance policies? And is everything up to date? And are you getting the best deal you possibly can? Because then, Sarah, once you have a starting point, right, then you've got to figure out what your end point is, what your goals are. So, again, get that honest assessment. And then step 2 is going into, figuring out the goals and what you really want to achieve in the course of your lifetime.
Yep. And that could be different for some people, Dave. Potentially like Kayla out in Illinois, who sent in a question as part of her Ask Dave segment. So Kayla says, I'm not sure how to start setting goals. It's an abstract concept for me. So what's the best way to do it?
Kayla, great question. And I don't know how old you are. I don't know how close you are to retirement. If you have children at home, you don't. But bottom line is you need to take some time to do this and consider all of the things that you want to have, all the things you want to do, and all the things you want to become over the course of your lifetime. And of course, that's going to be different depending upon where you are in your life. But it takes work. This isn't easy, Kayla, but like most things in life that are worthy of something, it doesn't come easy, right? In fact, I tell people sometimes you've got to take as much as 2 days. You don't have to do it together. You can do one day and do another day a week later, or you can do it in half days. But take some time and get away from your home. Get away from the ruckus, the noise. Go someplace that's quiet, that motivates you, that inspires you. So you can really think and start to dream about all those things you want to have, do, and become. And the reason this is important is because as children, we're willing to dream, right? Every child wants to be a fireman, but yet wants to be a billionaire. Well, most of us know those two don't go hand in hand, right? But as we get older, we find that we start to think about survival and getting by and paying the bills and maybe digging out of a hole. And we lose that ability to dream and really be productive and forward-looking. And if you're going to really set your goals, you need to start by doing it the right way. So it takes some time, but I promise you it's worth that effort. So block out some time. Again, it doesn't have to be all in 2 days contiguous, but block out some time where you can sit down and go through this and then listen to the rest of the show, because I want to explore with you more throughout the show, at least the next segment or so, about the proper way to set goals. Because Kayla, I will tell you that the people that are most successful in setting and achieving those goals are people that are good at experiencing those goals in their mind in advance, before they've ever occurred, and doing it in sensory specific fashion. That is the key to getting your subconscious mind moving toward those goals.
Absolutely. Well, Kayla, thank you so much for sending in your Ask Dave question. I hope that helped. And if any of our listeners out there have a question or a retirement concern that you would like Dave's help with, all you need to do is send us an email at askdave@retirementincomesource. That's SOURCE.com. And thank you for joining us here today on the Retirement Income Source, where it is all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton. And even though we're wrapping up the summer, it doesn't have to be the end. It could be the start of a fresh beginning with some of your finances. So Dave has put together a 5-part end of summer checklist for you. So number 1, we've talked about, this is take stock of what you have, really do an honest assessment, review your paperwork, take a look at your insurance policies. Don't be scatterbrained with your investments. Have them all in one place. And the second thing, which is extremely important, is your goals, figuring out your goals. And Dave, you just talked about some tips for people, maybe if they're having trouble visualizing or thinking about what they want. And you were talking about making sure that you're really sensory specific and maybe even practicing some of your goals in retirement to make sure they work for you. So can you go into a little bit more detail about ways to do that?
Yeah, and we talk about have, do, and become. Now, let's start with the have goals. The have goals are easiest to do, and they're easy to do in sensory specific fashion. And that's why maybe early on in your career, you had a manager or someone where you had a goal, you wanted to buy a certain car. And you took a picture of the car, your favorite color, and maybe you put it up in your office, in your cubicle, or put it in your bedroom, and you saw it every single day. So you had a good visual of what that looked like. And it's easier to do that with have goals, with tangible goals. If you want to buy a car, you go into the showroom, you pick out the car you want, you sit in it, you touch the leather, you listen to the sound system, maybe take it for a test drive, you hear the sound of it. So again, when we say sensory specific, it's what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, what it smells like, right? If you want to buy a vacation home, same thing. It's not just enough to say, I want to buy a vacation home, but it's enough. What you have to do is really think about, okay, what is that home going to look like? If it's a beach home, it's not enough to just say, I want a beach home, but it's like, what does it smell like when you go outside in the morning and you smell the salt air? And what does it feel like when you go out with your cup of coffee in the morning and you dig your toes into the sand, right? What does it sound like when you're lying in bed, you hear the waves crashing? So again, sensory specific. And the reason I'm stressing this is because this is what gets your unconscious mind, your subconscious mind working for you to go toward those goals, right? Because again, the people who are most successful at achieving goals are those that have lived those goals in sensory specific fashion in their minds well before they've ever happened. So again, the more senses you can invoke, the better. And that's easy with these have goals, right? Even if it's an RV. What does it smell like, sound like, look like, feel like? So again, it's really easy to be sensory specific with the have goals, but how about the do goals or the become goals? Or how about your retirement goals? All that and more coming up. I'm David Scranton here with Sarah Samuels, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income.
Welcome back to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with the host, Dave Scranton. And even though it's the end of summer, there is still time to get your finances in order and to use this 5-part end of summer checklist that Dave's created for everyone to help you really make sure you're organized, ready to go heading into the fall, which unfortunately is just a few weeks away now. So first part of the checklist, number 1, is take assessment of what you have. This is really take an honest assessment, an honest look at everything you have. Number 2, it's very important, is setting goals. So Dave just talked a little bit about those those have goals and how those can be easy to visualize, because it's usually things like maybe a new car, maybe it's a vacation home. But there are two other types of goals, and there are ways to visualize those goals to make sure you are setting yourself up properly to achieve them. So, Dave, let's talk about the do goals and how is it different, or how are those different than your have goals?
They're different because they're intangible. So when you have a have goal, again, you can get that sensory specific feeling by going to open houses if you want to buy a home, sitting in cars if you want to buy a car, going to shop for RVs, sitting in those, or boats and all that. So it's easier. You can really live it. But with the do goals, most of the time you can't live it in advance. So you have to dream. You have to be a little more creative. And the thing is to realize is that your subconscious mind doesn't know whether it's reality or not, but it'll believe what you tell it, which is why you got to be careful with negative self-talk, right? If you walk around saying, I'm a loser, I'm a loser, I'm a loser, your subconscious mind is going to say, well, this guy's a loser, right? It's not going to help. So your mind does listen to you, so you've got to be careful what you feed it. But here, it allows you to dream and create what you think that do goal would look like. So let's say your do goal is to take a 40-day cruise, right? You've never been on a 40-day cruise. You've never had that much time off from work, right? So how the heck do you know what it's like? Well, it doesn't matter. Dream it. Think about it. And write it down in sensory-specific fashion. Stream of consciousness writing. Don't worry about punctuation, grammar, spelling, anything. Just write, and dream. And if you can do that, then you will create your own vision of what that cruise looks like. And it'll be pleasurable. Now, will it really be that much fun? I don't know. You have to find out after you do it, right? But what it will do is get your subconscious mind working toward that. Why is that? Because you're going to have to make sacrifices, right? The next 3 items on the checklist are going to be sacrifices or changes that you might have to make to get closer to those goals. So in order to get closer, it takes some work, it takes some effort, maybe some sacrifice, right? So you need that fuel, that motivation, that vision in order to be able to do it. So with the do goals, take more time, write about them, dream about them, and to the better extent you can do that, I guarantee your subconscious mind will be swimming with the current, helping you achieve those.
Yep.
And of course, the last one, Sarah, as you know, is the have goals. And the have goals...
The become goals, yep.
The become goals, that's right, the become goals. Thank you for keeping me on track here. The become goals are sometimes the toughest. But that's kind of like, okay, what do I want to be known as? What kind of mom do I want to be known as? What kind of dad? What kind of grandparent? What kind of spouse? Those are... do I want to lose 40 pounds and why? So those are the become goals. And again, you have to dream about that in sensory specific fashion and write it down. So for example, it's a little morbid, but if you're having your eulogy, what would your spouse say about you? What would your grandchildren say about you? What would your children say about you? Weight loss goals, right? How good would it feel to be down 50 pounds and actually be able to keep up with your grandkids chasing them around, right? How good would that feel? How good would you look? How good would it feel to feel comfortable actually taking your shirt off on the beach, right? For guys, I guess for ladies too, because they've got their bathing
bikini,
suit. That's right. Yeah,
bikini, yep.
That's right. How good you look. So again, those are generally the ways to establish to become goals.
Yep. Well, Dave, you have the have goals, you have the do goals, and the become goals. But what about retirement goals? We have an Ask Dave question from Paul in Indiana, and he says, I want to create my retirement goals, but obviously I've never retired. So how do I figure out those goals?
Paul, correct?
Paul, yes.
All right, Paul. Well, see, retirement goals are have, do, and become. They're really all the above. But most people think of retirement as more do goals, and it really is. Why? Because in retirement, you now have 8 to 10 hours a day of free time. That used to be filled with commuting to work, commuting home from work, and being at work, right? So let's say it's 10 hours, and that's a void in your life, and you have to figure out how to fill that. And most of that are things that are in the do category. Now, you still never stop trying to become the best person you could be, so you want to focus on that. And there might be some have goals that fall into place, although the older we get, the less materialistic we are. But it's about the do goals. What are you going to do to fill that time? And I find that those folks that are have the most inspired and fulfilled retirements are those who have a clear vision of what retirement's going to look like. In other words, if you're just retiring, Paul, because the new boss is an idiot or you're tired of your job and you're moving away from something, I find that you're not going to be as fulfilled as if you have a clear vision of what you're moving toward in this next chapter of your life. So this is where you really got to think about what your retirement's going to look like. So how do you do it? Well, before retirement, a couple things you can do to get your head around it, since you're right, you haven't experienced it. First, clump your vacation time. Now, most people like to spread it out throughout the year, but if you have 4 weeks, maybe you want to clump it together and take it as a month 1 year or 2 years and actually take that off, because 1 week feels like a vacation, not retirement. 4 weeks in a row starts to feel like retirement, and you start to get a vision for what kind of routine you might fall into. That's one thing. The other thing I encourage you to do, Paul, is interview people who are retired, those who are retired and miserable that you might know, and those who are retired and happy, and interview them and find out what they've done. And that's a way you can kind of live retirement in advance, by living vicariously through their lives. So again, still have, do, and become, but those are a couple of tricks of the trade, if you will, that might help you get a better visualization of what the future can look like.
Paul, thank you so much for sending in your Ask Dave question. And if any of our listeners or our YouTube viewers out there have a question that you'd like Dave to answer, or potentially answer even on a future show, all you have to do is send us an email at askdave@retirementincomesource. That's SOURCE.com. You're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton, and we are reviewing our 5-part end of summer financial checklist. So number 1, take stock of what you have. We've talked about ways to do that. And number 2 is setting your goals, your short-term and long-term goals. We've talked a little bit about your have goals, your do goals, and your become goals, and how they all really play a role when it comes to visualizing the retirement of your dreams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the retirement is the hardest part, because people get a mental block there. Like, Paul just said, if I haven't done it, how do I know how to plan for it, right? And that's a good point. Yeah. But, I hear a lot of people saying, well, okay, gee, I'm just not that creative to dream about what that 40-day cruise might be like, and to live it in sensory fashion, in advance in my mind, and to write about it, to cover 2 pages of stream of consciousness writing. Well, years ago, I, wrote you remember our good friend Steve, our ex-business partner, right?
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Well, I remember Steve would always say, Dave, I'm just not creative. I'm just not creative. And I'd say, well, you know what the first secret is to being creative? He said, what? I said, stop telling yourself you're not creative, because your mind believes what you're telling it, right? So I'd say the same thing to those of you who think that you're not creative enough to do this. You are. And the happiness of your retirement is at stake here. So it's something that's important. But I understand it's harder when you're talking about retirement because you haven't lived it. And yes, there'll be some have things in retirement, and there'll be more become things, right? Because as you get older, you think more about your legacy and what people are going to remember you by. But also there's a lot of do things. And the early retirement years, those go-go years, it's a lot of do things, right? What am I going to do to fill that time that I used to spend working? And again, just whether it's taking time off by pooling up vacation time or living vicariously through others by interviewing those who've retired, are 2 great strategies. Yep. And then as you get past those, go-go years, you get to what we call the slow-go years, where now maybe, okay, I'm a little older, I don't want to travel, I don't want to do all that stuff. But now you start to think more about your legacy, and those become goals. So again, great investment. Take the time and do it. Because again, I can't stress this enough. I've seen people who've retired, who lived their whole lives and wanted to retire, and were miserable. Why? Because they just wanted to get away from the job and stop working. But I've seen those that were workaholics and loved it, but then they found a passion, a hobby they were more passionate about. They retired, and they had a joyous, fulfilled retirement, because they were moving toward something they envisioned, not away from something. And I think that's probably the most important takeaway with these retirement goals, Sarah.
Right, and goal setting can be fun. It's fun to imagine
make it fun,
your dreams. Right, you can make it fun. And the next 3 parts of our 5-part list, they involve a little bit of sacrifice. There are ways for you to take action so you can achieve your goals. So coming up, we're going to talk about some tips for reviewing and restructuring and ultimately paying down your debt. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. Welcome back to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton, and we are going over the end of summer 5-part checklist to make sure your personal finances are in order. So number 1, of course, take stock of what you have. Do a thorough review of all your finances. Number 2, set your goals. Think about those have goals versus those do goals versus those become goals, and how this all really plays into your retirement goals. But number 3, this is where the sacrifice comes in, right, Dave? This is the part that you need to do, the part where you need to take action in order to make those goals a reality. So number 3 is paying down your debt. Dave, what is the first type of debt that you really should pay down? If you have some money, you're ready to pay off those bills, what's the most important thing to pay first?
Well, conventional wisdom is, of course, pay the highest interest rate debts. And that does make sense, unless, let's say, you don't have enough money to maximize the matching on your 401k. And gosh, if I pay off this high interest debt, maybe it has a minimum payment, but then, I still don't have enough to maximize the matching. So in that case, you might want to go to a debt that has a little lower interest rate, but is close to being paid off. So maybe, you free up more cash flow by paying it off, and then you could, go ahead and take full advantage of the matching on your 401k. But that's an exception where you wouldn't actually go after the high interest rate debt first. Generally speaking, you want to get the highest interest rate stuff first, like the credit cards. And frankly, because you never know if the economy is going to turn, if you get laid off, if something happens, if you could pay off those credit cards, it's always nice to know that you can then use them again should you need them. Next thing, home equity lines of credit. If you pay those off, then you can always readvance that should you need it, should you get laid off or anything. Automobile payments also. Now, they're great to pay off. The only problem is you can't readvance that. So you've got to feel really comfortable that if you were to get laid off or something, that you're going to be okay if you're going to pay off that car loan. But definitely, you want to go into retirement without credit cards, without anything owed on your home equity line of credit. And you want to go into retirement without any car loans, student loans, okay, all those installments, because retirement is a combination of offense and defense. Yes, we want to get the investments working, generating income. We'll talk about that later on in the show. But also, you want to have your minimum expenses down to the least they could be. So now, if things go well and you have more cash flow in retirement, now you can achieve all those do goals and have a lot of fun versus having all your income getting soaked up with your basic needs. And you know what? Sometimes, many times, it's also good to strive to get your mortgage paid off in retirement also. And I know you might have a 3.5% interest rate on your mortgage. I get that. But still, it's not about just paying the interest, right? Mortgages aren't interest only. You have to pay the principal. So if you have an investment generating 5% interest, that's great. But the 5% interest, yeah, it might pay for the 3.5% interest rate on the loan, but it probably won't be enough to pay for the principal and interest. So again, it's going to hurt you from a cash flow standpoint. So in retirement, you've got to think cash flow.
Yep. And a lot of people can have trouble prioritizing which debts to pay. Our next Ask Dave question actually has to do with this. So we got an email from Eddie in Arizona. He says, should I pay off my mortgage first, or should I try to max out my 401k? What should be my priority?
Eddie, great question. And I guess, let me say, first of all, the disclaimer is it really depends upon a lot of factors. It depends on how much money you've accumulated, your tax bracket, how far you are from retirement, lots and lots of things. But I will say this. If you haven't maximized the match in your 401k, assuming you have a match, then you want to do that first, because that's free money. If the company's giving you 50 cents on a dollar, or even better, dollar for dollar, like our 401k, then you want to get that maxed out. Above that is where you have to make the decision. Where am I better off, right? And again, part of it's your tax bracket. If you're in a high tax bracket, you might get more bang for your buck by just maxing out that 401k and leaving the mortgage intact, at least for now. If you're not in such a high tax bracket, you might be better off stalling and just not, just making sure you're maxing out the match, but then not putting any more in the 401k and getting that mortgage paid off. Because again, in retirement, the problem is, you have so much income coming in, and that income has to pay not just the interest, but also the principal. So a lot of times, Eddie, people think, oh gosh, I'm making 5%, I'm paying something at 3.5%, I should keep that all day long. Well, not necessarily, because you can't just pay the interest, you have to pay the principal too. So those are some things to at least explore along the way. But ideally, I would love to see you in a situation where you are mortgage-free going into retirement. Another strategy, real quick, Eddie, might just be Roth IRAs. If you build up your Roth IRA, that's tax-free money that can then be used maybe to pay off that mortgage in a lump sum once you're in retirement.
Yep. Well, Eddie, thank you so much for sending in your Ask Dave question. And if you have a question or you have a concern about your retirement, something that you would like Dave to answer, all you have to do is send us an email at askdave@retirementincomesource.com, and you might hear your question featured on a future show. Thanks for listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton, and we are going through our end of summer personal finances checklist. So all the things that you really should take a look at now to make sure you're set up for success as we head into the fall and of course next year. So number one, take stock of what you have. Number two, set your goals. Think about those have, do, and become goals and how they play a role in your retirement. And number three, paying down debt. So we just heard from Dave as to Eddie's question about when to pay off your mortgage versus maybe maxing out your 401k and what the options that you should really consider. And that leads us to number four, which is review the plan, your savings plan for retirement. We talked about this on a recent show, Dave, but at 59.5, it's that magic number. You can now do an in-service rollover of your 401k, if you're still working, of your 401k to another account. So there's a lot of different options that you should consider.
Well, the first thing you have to consider is reviewing your contributions. You know, are you maxing out your contributions? And if you're over the age of 50, you've got catch-up features on those where you can actually put more money into most of these 401k type plans. So if you're debt-free or you're on a path to become debt-free and you can afford to do it, maxing out those plans will often make sense. Now, it also depends on tax bracket. The higher the tax bracket you're in when you're working, the more it makes sense. But let's say you're in a lower tax bracket when you're working. And now you say, well, oh my goodness, I might be in a higher tax bracket when I'm retired because I saved a lot. I've got Social Security, which will be 85% taxable. I've got required minimum distributions coming in at age 73. I might actually be in a higher bracket. Or you maybe just think brackets are going up, right? Well, if that's the case, then you might want to consider Roth IRA. Maxing out whatever you could do in Roth IRA contributions and use the catch-up features, again, if you're over the age of 50. Or if you've maxed all that out, then go to just non-qualified money, regular brokerage accounts that are taxable, okay? But the point is, maximize that savings first once you know you're either debt-free or on a trajectory to be debt-free. And then, of course, like you said, looking at your plans and saying, hey, can I take in-service withdrawals and rollovers, tax-free rollovers from a 401k to an IRA or a 403b to an IRA? And, we talked about it just last week. Of course, that's important because the options can be limited in some of those plans and maybe not as appropriate for somebody over age 59.5 as they were when you were younger.
Oh, yeah, Dave, we just talked about this last week, the mutual funds, how a lot of 401ks rely on mutual funds. And, of course, the issues with that if you're at or near retirement age, that it's there's some hidden fees, that it could be really opaque and hard to understand what you're paying for. Plus, there's not really many income options. And we know what is retirement income, right? It's all about the income.
It's all about the income. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, and it's also just cookie cutter. And, I don't want your retirement to be cookie cutter. I want your retirement to be your retirement, whatever it is that you want. And so if you're going to customize your retirement and go through my goal setting process, and I hope you do, then you should have a customized investment strategy also as to how to go through that. And unfortunately, most 401ks, 403bs, 457 deferred comp plans just don't offer that amount of customization. And frankly, a lot of financial advisors also still use a lot of mutual funds, which don't offer that level of customization. So again, after you get done, being on that trajectory for being debt-free, then take a serious assessment of your savings plans and how much you're putting where, your ability to roll money out tax-free to IRAs, and also your balance between tax-deferred accounts like 401ks and IRAs, tax-free accounts like Roth IRAs, and taxable accounts. Just like you want your investments to be diversified, you want your tax strategy to be diversified also.
That's right. And you're leading into number 5, which is going to be reviewing your asset allocation, making sure that your assets are properly allocated for you. Why this is so important, tips for making this happen. We're going to be talking about that. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income.
And welcome back to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm David Scranton here with Sarah Samuels. And today we're going over our late summer 5-part checklist to make sure that your finances are in order. Why? Because I know that in the summertime, there's a lot of fun things to do, spend time with friends and family, and maybe we lose our focus just a wee bit. So far we covered first, making an honest assessment of what you have in terms of assets, in terms of debts, in terms of insurance, etc. Number 2, establishing your goals, all the have, do, and become goals. And even though you haven't experienced retirement, how to live vicariously through others in developing your own retirement goals. Then strive to become debt-free in retirement and how to go about doing it. And last, we talked about savings plans, how to figure out your savings and investment strategy between all types of various accounts to maximize what you can have during retirement. And Sarah, I have to tell you that I know this is our end of summer checklist, but you keep saying end of summer, summer's almost done. You know, you do realize there are 2 more weeks to Labor Day weekend, right? So it's not that bad. And there's even more than that, probably 4.5 weeks till the end of the summer. So a lot more time there. Let's enjoy it, but let's get focused on this checklist and keeping things up to speed. So number 4, Sarah, as you mentioned, is making sure your asset allocation is really appropriate for you. And Sarah, I know we talk about this all the time on the show, but I think it could be one of the most important topics because a lot of people just do the set it and forget it, push the button thing. And as you get close to retirement or in retirement, that just doesn't cut it anymore.
Oh, yeah, Dave. Well, you talk about all the time the difference, once you're heading into retirement and when you should really think about making that transition and the benefits if you're 5 to 10 years out from retirement, making that income transition, right? Instead of looking at that total return, you focus on the income instead of the growth. And if you don't need that money, like you're still working, for example, you can actually reinvest that money and grow your portfolio the old-fashioned way, as Dave likes to say. But there's different times where your assets should be allocated in different ways. So Dave, tell us why that's so important, why it's number 5 on the list here of our end of summer checklist.
There you go, almost. You caught yourself.
Almost.
Yeah, so first thing is to make sure the investments are in your risk tolerance level. So you figure out how much loss you'd be willing to take in retirement on paper, right? If you have $1 million, if it drops to 900, do a gut check. How does that feel? How about 800, 700? Where's your pain point? And in retirement, not when you're working, because you've had those drops and you're working, but it's different when you retire because now you're relying on that money, okay? So that's the first thing is figure that out, and that helps you back into how much risk you could take in your investments. But Sarah, you're right. The single most important transition that anyone could make leading into retirement is that transition should be from being total return focused, regardless of whether it comes from the income or the growth. That works when you're your age, Sarah, right? You're young, you want total return. You don't care if it comes from growth or capital appreciation or whether it comes from income, interest and dividends. You just want to make money on your money.
Yep, absolutely.
But when you get within 10 years of retirement, and the closer to retirement you get, the more important it is to focus on the I first, having an income first, growth second mindset.
Well, our next Ask Dave question actually has to do with knowing if you're invested for income or not. So let's get to it. We've got Taylor here from New Mexico, and they say, how do I know if I'm invested for income? Where can I find this on my statements?
Taylor, great question, and you may or may not be able to find it on your statement. For example, if you have a 401k or a 403b or something, you probably don't have income on your statement. If you have a brokerage account of sorts, then it depends upon who the company is. Some companies have it, some don't. Now, if you work with an independent advisor that clears through Fidelity or Schwab or one of the big firms, they've got an ability on the statement to either have an income column or not have an income column. And if you have an income column, it's probably because the advisor, now you can see exactly how much income your investments are generating, how much interest and dividends they're generating. If you don't have an income column, it's probably because the financial advisor that you're working through doesn't specialize in income. So they ask the providers to take that income column off the statement because it just doesn't reflect well on what they're doing. So it's part of it is looking at the statement and trying to figure out if there's an income column. And then if not, go to your advisor and find out. Go to your custodian and find out, because at the end of the day, you want to figure out how much income you're generating, because that's how you can determine whether or not you can afford to retire or how close you are. If you're getting, right now I would say you can get, without taking excessive risks, 5% net of fees for income. So that means if you've got $1 million, you can get $50,000 a year in your pocket. So if you've got $1 million and you're getting $20,000 a year, well, then you're leaving a lot of potential income on the table. And if you're not retired yet, that's okay, because if you reinvest that $50,000 of income, it's going to grow at 5% per year. So a year later, it'll be $52,500. A year later, $55,000. But if you're only getting $20,000, it's only going to, when you reinvest it, it's only going to grow at 2% a year, right? So that's why it's so important to make that transition before retirement, because since retirement is all about the income, as we say every week, you have to make that mindset shift to determine, not how much my accounts are worth, but how much income they're generating versus how much they can generate.
Yep, and that's one of the great things about income, that it is very customizable for you based off your needs and your goals, of course. So Taylor, thank you so much for sending in your question for Dave to answer. If any of our listeners or our YouTube viewers have a retirement question or maybe a finance question that you'd like Dave to answer, send us an email. Ask Dave at retirementincomesource.com. We would love to hear from you. You're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton, and it is the almost end of summer, right? So we're doing our almost end of summer checklist. It's our 5-part checklist to make sure that you are in shape for the rest of the year and get you ready for 2024.
Just so they know what to focus on once Labor Day hits, right?
Yep, exactly. Dave, you say I'm rushing the end of summer, but I think this could get us set up for 2024. So you're kind of rushing the rest of the year. But let's look at it one more time. So number 1, take stock of what you have. Do an honest assessment of what you have. Number 2, set your goals, your short-term goals, your longer-term goals, looking at the have, do, and become goals. Of course, number 3, making a plan to pay down your debt. Figure out which debts that you need to pay first. Number 4, reviewing your retirement savings plan. If you are still employed, doing some catch-up contributions if possible. And then, of course, number 5, the most important, is making sure your assets are properly allocated for you. This is the big difference here with the income model versus this retirement plan. And Dave, I want to ask you, why do you think it's important people make this transition from a retirement planner to a true income specialist once they're, a few years out from retirement or nearing retirement?
Well, most retirement planners are good at a total return strategy. They focus on growing your money, but then you get into retirement, they keep the same strategy and they expect you to withdraw money from your account. Well, the problem is they're withdrawing it and hoping that it grows back. And the reality is you can't spend growth. Let's make no bones about it. If you're spending growth, what you're really doing is you're spending principal, you're hoping it grows back. And granted, they can back test it, so 90% of the time, maybe it did grow back and you were okay, but 10% of the time, it means that it doesn't. It means you could run out of money if you live long enough. So as we talk about every week, the only real conservative way, the only safe way to take income in retirement is to get it from the interest and dividends, and that way there you leave your principal intact. Sure, if you're in your late 80s, you want to start drawing down a little bit of principal, okay, maybe that's okay. But if you retire in your 60s or early 70s, don't even think about it. And that's why this transition is so important, because again, most retirement planners use a total return focus, whether you're leading up to retirement or in retirement. So they pretend that your goals haven't really even changed. Yes, they're going to send you checks. If you ask them, well, can I get X amount of income? Sure, you can get that much. Why? Because they'll just sell that many shares and they'll send it to you. But oftentimes what they're not clear about is they're sending you principal, and that puts you at risk of running out of money. But when you make that transition to an income-based advisor, an income specialist, that income specialist now knows to make it an income first, growth second philosophy. Doesn't mean you're going to sacrifice growth or you're not going to get any growth. We all love growth. We feel good when our statements go up. But guess what? We feel even better when we're retired and we get those checks in the mail. We know we don't have to sell principal. We get the checks every month, just like when we're working full time.
Yep. And a great way to think about it, of course, is the chicken versus the eggs. Income is the eggs. You're having delicious scrambled eggs every morning for breakfast, right? Whereas growth would be the chicken. Maybe that's a one-time delicious fried chicken dinner, but it's not income. It's not eggs every single day.
Eat the fried chicken dinner. You're not going to get any more eggs.
No more eggs after that. Exactly. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Retirement Income Source. And if you did, please share it with your friends and family members. All you have to do is go to the retirementincomesourceradioshow.com and see all of our past episodes there.
We certainly hope you do that. But more importantly, we hope you join us again right here next week, same time, same station. I'm David Scranton with Sarah Samuels, and this is the Retirement Income Source, where it is all about the income.